everybody, and welcome back to a new video. So it is finally now time for summer, which means more summer dresses. So for today's video, we are going to be making a white linen summer dress. I actually made this for a fashion show I had a month back or so. It kind of was a spur of the moment to even sign up to be in it, and I procrastinated on making this dress until literally the week before it was due. And I was working on it up until 10 minutes before the time it was due, but it ended up being a huge hit. It even won the Most Marketable Design Award, which is super crazy and super awesome. I totally did not expect to win. So jump right into this tutorial of how I made it and the end result. As usual, I started with my bodice. Since the fabric is a white linen, it is very see-through, so I used this cream color cotton lining to help make it a little bit thicker. I messed up a little bit at the beginning, but since the bodice was going to be a drawstring, I cut out two rectangular bust pieces that were 1.5 times bigger than my measurement so that it could be gathered. For each bust piece, I cut out two lining pieces and one fabric piece, making it 3 layers thick total. For the underbust / waist piece, I cut out one lining piece on the center fold and one fabric piece, making that part only 2 layers thick. Once I cut out the lining pieces, I laid them onto the linen fabric to cut them out. The waist part consists of the middle piece and 2 side parts since the back will be open, so I connected each side part to the middle part and sewed it down for both the lining and the fabric. Taking the bust pieces, I sewed them together on the top edge only, and then got to work on the drawstrings. I cut out 2 rectangles of fabric and then folded them into fourths, tucking in the raw edge along with folding in the raw edge on top of one of the edges so that it would not be sticking out for the ties. When cutting out the strings, I cut out enough to tie in the front as well as in the back, as the back of the dress would be a tie-up back, so the straps had to be much longer than I originally planned. After sewing down both sides of the strings, I top stitched down the top edge of the pieces, folding in the side raw edges, and then sewed down another line to create a channel for the strings to go through. Using a safety pin, I inserted the string in and pulled it through for the back tie, then secured it down along with sewing down the side edge of the bust. I also made sure to sew down the side edge of the center front, making sure to stop right before the channel to not sew down the drawstring so that it can still move and be functional. Moving on to the skirt, I cut out a long rectangle of the linen fabric and then repeated it for the lining. I wanted to make sure that the lining would not be visible through the bottom of the dress, but I most certainly cut the lining just a little too short. Going back to my serger, I serged the top raw edges of the skirts as well as the side edges, and then for the linen skirt only, I serged the bottom raw edge for where I would attach the ruffle. Using my trusty hand sewing needle, I did a quick running stitch to gather the top edges of both skirts, and then connected the linen skirt to the linen waist right sides together. It is important to remember that since the waist part does not cover the back as it is backless, but the skirt has to go all the way around, they will not exactly line up. I then connected the lining skirt to the lining waist piece, and then connected both of them together to make it one cohesive piece. I gathered the bottom edge of each bust piece, and then folding in the raw edges of the waist pieces, I inserted in the bust pieces and then top stitched them down. For the raw edge on the back of the skirt, I cut out 2 small rectangles and sewed them over that raw edge, acting as a bias tape or a waistband in a way. Making 2 more strings, I inserted them into the sides of the waist pieces and then sewed everything down to make sure it was nice and secure. Moving on to the sleeves, I wanted it to be a puff sleeve, but not too much of a puff since the skirt would be big. I cut out 2 rectangles the circumference of my arm to be the arm cuffs, and then I took the sleeves to my serger to serge the top rounded edge of the sleeve as well as the side edges. Putting the 2 edges of the cuff together, I sewed it down to create a tube-like shape, then folded together the sleeve to sew together those side seams, as well as folding down the top edge of the sleeve to create a channel for the elastic. Then, using a safety pin, I inserted in the elastic and then secured it down on either side of the sleeve. Using my hand sewing needle once again, I gathered the bottom of the sleeve and then folded the cuff into fourths to tuck in that raw edge, and then used the cuff to cover the raw edge of the bottom of the sleeve. Once the sleeves were all together, I went back to the base of my dress and I connected the sleeves to the bust part, making sure to not sew over the drawstrings. Then with the leftover fabric, I cut out rectangles of fabric and then sewed them together to make one long tube of the linen fabric. Using my serger, I serged down that seam allowance and then serged the top edge of the drying strip, which definitely took quite a bit of time. I gathered the tube as I sewed it to the bottom of the skirt, right sides together, to create the bottom ruffle, and then I did a rolled hem along the bottom of the ruffle, and then the dress was complete.